back here on the Cover 3 podcast. Tom, you pointed to Oregon. They were top 5 in the recruiting rankings last year. They are top 5 in the recruiting rankings again. But as you pointed out, just 9 commits in the group, an average player rating of 92.1, according to 24/7 Sports. And that is based on average player rating, the highest average player rating in the entire country. When we take a look at Oregon's transfer portal class, Tom, what stands out to you as some of the players that you think will be able to jump in with the Ducks and be able to be key contributors?
Well, I think the obvious thing that stands out and I think is important is what's not in there. There's no quarterback. So, they got what's his name? Oh, the kid from UCLA, Dante Moore. Yeah. They got him. So maybe they're looking at him as the replacement for Dylan Gabriel, and they're going to move forward with that, or maybe they're going to wait to the spring and see what pops open. But based on what they do have, like Emmanuel Pregnone from USC, they've got to put in the inside of their offensive line. They're losing players there. They got Mekhi Hughes at running back, who will step in and fill the Jordan James role. Malik Benson, the wide receiver from Florida State, who will help fill in for Tez Johnson. Like, this is a team, like I said, they've recruited very well out of high school. So they've got a very talented roster, but they're looking at it going into the next season saying, all right, where are some spots we could use a little depth, maybe find a starter where we don't feel super confident about and just supplement it. And I think that's what they've done a terrific job of. They don't have, like we've talked about it a ton, like Bud's, there's no superstars really in this transfer class. There's not the oh my God, the game changer guy. But there are a lot of very good, very above average, valuable guys who will be contributors at that kind of elite level where maybe you're not going to rely on them to be the guy, but they can fill their role. And I look at this class and I see a whole hell of a lot of guys who are going to step in, they're going to get snaps, they're going to be valuable, and they're going to help improve the floor of this team and maybe the ceiling a bit too. It's a very, very nice class. And when you look at the outgoing, they do have a lot of guys who are leaving, but unless you are a diehard Oregon fan and you've known this roster up and down because you've been following recruiting for the last whatever years, you remember these guys getting offered and tweeting their top 5 schools, there's not a ton of names in there where you're like, unless you're just a diehard fan, that are popping up like, oh, that's a big loss.
I agree. I mean, like, Oregon has the money to get the very few premium guys in this class. 2 things. Number one, I know we have some questions in the chat on Oregon, so we might as well just from the private, or not the private, but the starred portion of the chat. Why are you so down on Dante Moore? Who do you think the Ducks should have picked up in the transfer portal? Thanks, go Ducks. I know for a fact Oregon was definitely kicking the tires and looking at other quarterbacks in the transfer portal. Like, I talked to enough people in the industry. They did not get them. Arizona State kept Sam Leavitt. I know there are a couple other guys they also looked at pretty hard. Now, it doesn't mean they were tampering with them, but obviously you got to kind of do your due diligence, make sure everybody's happy where they are, that kind of thing. But ultimately,
it's taking the temperature. It's not contact,
Yeah.
It's just taking the temperature.
Yep. But outwardly, you have to project that Dante Moore is our guy. He's been our guy no matter what, because you're trying to recruit off that, and you got to keep everybody happy in house. But this is not how the game is truly played. And I know for a fact that Oregon was really looking at other guys too. So it makes me wonder just how much they believe in Moore. But I imagine they believe in him a pretty good bit, because otherwise Oregon has enough money to go out and get somebody they thought that person was clearly better than Moore. So I guess I circle back around to the idea that maybe they do like him enough relative to what was available in the portal, or maybe what could have come available in the portal.
They got 3 good offensive linemen. And when I think about just sort of the different ways that Oregon offensive line had to mix the pieces around, they were dealing with injuries, and it was a huge talking point for why it took the Ducks a couple weeks to get going. Buddy, there is nothing that hurts about having more talented big guys added to the roster. And that's what stands out to me about sort of Oregon's haul, is just identifying that when you're going to be breaking in a new quarterback, when you're going to be sort of taking the next step in whatever this offense is going to look like, having really talented offensive linemen to be able to try to put something together is a really great place to start for a program that has enjoyed the spoils of having a pretty good offensive line for the most part, though, over the last half decade or so.
So wouldn't this be a prime candidate for a school to watch after the spring
for quarterbacks?
See how it's going. Like, hey, if it's good, we're good. All right, we'll just hold our breath and hopefully it keeps continuing to progress. But if it doesn't, they open that back up. They lost the kid, right, that was there in January or there for the bowl practice, the kid that went to Cal.
Is that Novosad?
No, Jaron Kupatelli.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. He was he was going to be an early enrollee.
He was there like 2 weeks, right? And then he was like, I'm out.
Start for Cal.
Yeah.
Yep. That was a good grab for them for sure.
Good news
Elsewhere
for the Ducks. I read this on. Sorry, not this is the last thing for me on this. I read this on Duck territory, but their chief of staff, Marshall Macho, he said that this is the most talented West Coast class that they've seen since they've been there. So awesome.
talking about 25.
26.
That the 26 class is the most West Coast talent that they've had in a couple years.
Yeah.
It's a good thing for Oregon, a good thing for USC, and a lot of those programs out
They'll
there.
probably all end up at Illinois.
Uh,
As a top 10 class in 2026 right now. I noticed we're talking about transfers when Illinois got a top 10 class. I see what you're doing, Chip.
Yeah, I'm just the deep state continues to work against Illinois and preventing Illinois from getting the shine they need. What about programs that took big losses along the way? Who stands out?
Well, Purdue's entire team went in the portal.
I know. So
Purdue.
yeah, this doesn't need like a whole talking point, but I was also looking at like who are the very largest classes. The very largest classes: West Virginia, Purdue, UCF. New coach, new coach, new coach. Like roster left. Them getting 31 transfers is not going to be worth the talking point of like, is it sustainable? Because I'll tell you what, Rich Rod would be like, hey, buddy, I need to field a team right now. And this is one of the only ways that we can get out there and field a team. But yeah, what about programs that took some losses along the way?
I think it's also way more sustainable if your goal is to be like somewhere between like 40 and or like 45 to 25 ish in terms of like national ranking.
Right.
That I think is sustainable in the portal. I don't think you have like the top end of the draft guys in the portal, but I think you could easily sustain being a top half Big 12 team by portaling your entire roster every year and recruiting nobody at high school. I think that is sustainable, although it is expensive.
That's true. Because you never know what your market values are going to be, whether it's going to compare to replacement and all those things.
Are we skipping Miami's class? No, if Beck comes back healthy and plays at a high level, then it's a great class. If not, then it's, massively overrated. It depends on the one player.
Ooh, now Miami. Well, all right. So let's
watch him play in the bowl game? I mean, good Lord.
All right. So Miami's average player rating is 90.6. That is second on a per player rating in the country behind Oregon. They do have a class that is welcoming just 11. So it's not, one of these crazy, they get a high ranking just because they've got 25 transfers in there.
And nearly half of it's in the secondary.
Yeah, Carson Beck is at the top, but Tom just hit on the storyline there. It is the way that you would hope. I mean, Miami is a conference title contender. Like they achieve that status. That's where we are. Miami is back. Texas is back. Everybody's back. We're done saying back. Okay. Now it's about getting over the hump. And the one thing that Miami needed a lot of help with was in the secondary. So Tom, you are correct. That's where most of these guys are. That's where most of these guys are going to have the most impact outside of Carson Beck, if you ask me.
Yeah, they got 4 new corners, and they've got 2 safeties, one of which was very, very public. Or no, wait, Xavier Lucas is a corner. Poiser's the only safety they have. Yeah, they looked at their secondary last year and said, "Wow, this is a problem." We also looked at our defensive coordinator and said, he's probably part of the problem that we're having in our secondary, so we're going to change all of it. And that's what they've done. Will it work? We'll find out. But I do agree with Bud. I think Carson Beck will ultimately decide how good this class was.
Like if Miami hits at a 50% rate on these DBs, they're probably fine on DBs. They don't actually need all 4 of them to hit. With Beck, it is a very binary outcome. If he hits, cool. If he's not healthy and can't actually play, which again, I think he will be healthy. Otherwise, I can't imagine you'd invest that kind of money in a player that doesn't have a near certainty of being good. But it does happen occasionally. So if he busts, then all these DB and all this other stuff they took, it doesn't really matter because they're going to come up short of expectations.
You mentioned before the show, you mentioned Alabama as a team that maybe didn't lose a lot of the high end guys that you're looking at. who are some of the names that made you start thinking like, those are interesting names that are starting to hit the portal and head elsewhere?
Just like a lot of guys for Bama who don't start, and I'm still like really high on Alabama. I think when you look at their 22, I think they're going to be one of the more improved teams in the country. When talking about teams that were already like really damn good, obviously there will be teams that go from 2-10 to whatever, or 4-8 to whatever, that'll show more improvement in the win column than the Tide will. But I think Bama should be really good, but they're going to have to stay healthy because they are losing a lot of guys who are going to like other decent P5 programs, or better than decent in some cases, to go take starting roles. So like that's a bit of a concern, I think, if you're the Tide. I thought Georgia Tech had some pretty key losses, losing Height, losing Singleton. It's not like they have a ton of difference makers on that team. So losing guys who were difference makers for them, that's a bad sign. I think Virginia Tech is in real trouble, to be honest. Just like look, they lose Jalen Stroman, who's expected to start at safety for Notre Dame. They lose Xavier Chaplin, who's expected to start, I believe, at left tackle for Auburn. You lose Phillips to Missouri. That's kind of whatever. You lose 2 offensive linemen, probably going to both start. You lose Delane, maybe your best corner, should start at LSU. That's a lot, man. Like I don't know. Scary.
Yeah, like going back to Alabama, like they're going to be talented, but you mentioned like the injury factor of what they're losing, because they've got 3 offensive linemen who have left via the portal and 5 defensive linemen. So when you start suffering injuries on your lines of scrimmage next year, if you're Alabama, you might have some very inexperienced players having to step into big time roles, and that could have an impact when you're playing in that league and what your goals are.
Yeah. Oh, it's a new day at Alabama, Tom. Who needs depth when now we've got dress code in the building? Oh, now people aren't late anymore. Oh, we're bringing back Alabama cult. Y'all got a little whiff of this? We're hitting.
I heard they're working out harder. The defense is going to be more aggressive. Offense is going to be more explosive, but also run the ball and be tougher.
They're going to show up into camp in the best shape of their lives.
Everybody's getting PRs straight across the board. PRs, man.
Listen, yeah, somebody was one player told reporters, I go, we don't do jewelry anymore. Okay.
Perfect attendance award.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Okay. The tailgate, we got some Wolfpackers in the or at least Wolfpack aware the members of the tailgate here today who are calling attention to the 17 players that left NC State. Look, 17 in itself is not a wild number. No, the concerning thing is where some of those 17 players went, like Casey Concepcion, star wide receiver. He ends up at Texas A&M. It is losing Brandon Cisse to South Carolina, Devin Boykin to Indiana, Bishop Fitzgerald to USC, to Marcus Cooley to LSU. I mean, these are good players that are going and finding homes at good programs. Not always the best feeling when you're a fan and you start to just run that math.
When players on your team enter the portal, you always wish them the best, but you hope the best is some small G5 league.
Yeah.
When they start going to better programs, you're like, oh, crap.
Do you know what NC State and the Hokies have in common?
They're in the ACC.
It felt like last year were kind of all-in years for them, as like and playing defense and keeping their important guys, and they both went belly up. And at some schools, like at FSU, they went 2-10, and guess what? Like the money cannon is still firing because like football is that important there. I don't think that like the booster structure at Virginia Tech and NC State is the same level. So I think if you had guys who ponied up maybe more than they're used to keep your studs for 24, and then you suck, they're probably not coming back and donating the same level in 25 relative to what everybody else has. Like the number might be the same, but your ranking as to where that number puts you in the overall spending of the country is probably way less. That's a guess by me. It's not me reporting, but just kind of there's a commonality there.
They had to give all that money to Big Ben Middlebrooks. Danny negotiated a great deal, and they didn't have anything left for the football team.
There is a downside to being good at football and basketball. Like at some schools, it's like, yeah, basketball, what's that? We're just going to spend on football, right?
Right.
But NC State cares about basketball. Like their house money is probably not, $15 million going to football.
Right.
That's why the SEC sucks at football now, because their basketball is just like
Exactly.
the greatest league on earth.
I think that there's a great point there, because NC State and Virginia Tech were the dark horse conversation, and neither of them came in. They were not with any. Was it furloughs? Not furloughs. Furlinks? They were a lap down. They were not a dark
furlong.
Furlong.
There you go. To say furlough is a very different thing.
I know.
Something I hope the three of us never experience.
That's the NC State and Virginia Tech both eyed as teams that had a great opportunity in 2024 to maybe be a factor, and neither of them were anywhere close. So that's a great call by you, bud.
Is NC State basketball good this year? The chat's kind of roasting me for my takes.
No,
not good. Okay.
No, it's bad. In fact, yeah, it's
the Hokies any good at basketball?
They've taken a step back too.
The entire ACC stinks outside of like Clemson and Duke.
Yep.
Like I knew Florida State sucked. I haven't watched a single college basketball game this year.